Hey there, I'm Ian Douglas. I'm the author of the website techinterview.guide, and I'm here to help people with career advancement and interview preparation. My live stream on Twitch covers topics such as company research, how to build resumes and cover letters, applying for the job, getting through interviews, and what to do during negotiations. I've coached thousands and thousands of people over the years to get jobs at the biggest tech companies in the industry, and I'm here to help you too. The following episode is taken from a longer live stream event and may contain interactions with other people in chat. Check out the end of the episode for more information. Let's get to it. And I will attempt to go find my other browser with the resumes in it. There it is. And we're going to go do the second resume. All right, so here's the second resume that we're going to review for the evening. This one, they took their name off completely, but they have LinkedIn, GitHub, and a LeetCode profile on here as well. I would say the LeetCode profile is probably not as important as you think it is. A lot of companies aren't going to care so much about like the competitive programming side of things. If they really care about things like LeetCode, I mean, they'll probably ask for it specifically. I don't think that it's important to have on the resume though. I think LinkedIn and GitHub are pretty necessary, but I would take the LeetCode link off of here. I don't think that that's really going to help. Let me give you some backstory on this resume. Let me go find that real quick. This resume specifically, they were, I believe, a new graduate. I'd like to get critiqued on how I can improve my resume. Being a new graduate, getting calls is a challenge. So one of the things that I talk about on the stream a lot is how do you stand out on a resume? How do you get noticed? Because getting that first job in tech is always going to be the hardest thing. How do you differentiate yourself? And I've talked several times about like building a flow chart of like, if you get this far and then they don't continue, here's some things that you could try. In this case, they've got a resume and they're not getting phone calls. So that tells me that there's something about their application that's either being rejected or being ignored or not being found within applicant tracking systems that's causing them not to get a phone call. In this case, they are based in India, based on information that they provided. So if they're looking for a job in India, then that's one thing. If they're applying for a job outside of India, then it could be a geographic bias happening where they are very clearly presenting on the resume that they're in India. Let me zoom in on it here a little bit as well. They are presenting that they are living in India and they're working in India currently, or that they have done work in India. But they're trying to get noticed by other companies. So again, the question here is, are they looking for work in India or are they looking for work outside of India? Because that'll make a difference for how to target your resume and so on from here. Core Count says in chat, the thing that throws me off when reading a resume is when someone lists a specific product but gets the version wrong, like experience working with Windows Server 2018. There is no such a thing. If you are well versed enough in those technologies to know that that's not a thing, then you're probably going to be able to sort of catch other things on a resume that look like this person's blatantly lying or, you know, putting other false things on the resume, and you'll just pass on them. But again, the recruiters aren't typically going to know that kind of thing. They're going to see, oh, Windows Server 2018, that sounds important, and they're going to pass it on to a hiring manager who is going to know those things if that's important to them. But if they don't care about Windows Server at all, and they see that on the resume, like, all right, Windows Server, whatever, they're not going to even bother looking up that version. Now, if they said something like Python 5, you know, any Python developer knows it's only at 3.10, 3.11's coming out. Python 5's not a thing. Python 4 is like barely a thing. So some things are going to be easier to spot than others. When it comes to major technologies like Windows Server 2018, and that's not a correct version, was it a typo or are they lying on the resume? And sometimes as you read through the resume, you can start to get a hint here of like whether that's possible or whether that was a thing. And it'll, and there'll be other things, within the resume that'll kind of feel off, at which point, if anything feels off in a resume, they're just going to dump the whole resume and they'll be like, there's something off about this, and they'll just dump it. So from an overall layout point of view, let me zoom out on this one. So from a layout point of view, there's a lot of empty space up here. And I'm guessing that this is where their name would have been. What they did is they zoomed out on the resume and they took a screenshot of it, and it looks like they've cleared out some content. But there's also this empty block of content down here in the bottom left corner. So it does look a little bit imbalanced. Me personally, I'm not particular about 2-column formats. I have heard anecdotally that applicant tracking systems, if they can detect 2 columns, that the preference that's coded into most ATS software is that the left column is less important and the right column is more important. And so if you do a 2-column layout, you typically want your left column to be skinnier and hold less important information than what's on the right side. The things on the right side, it may give different weight values to the keywords that it finds based on which column it sees it in. I haven't verified that with anybody, but it was something that I've heard from a recruiter about applicant tracking systems. So I wanted to pass that along as like something to maybe keep in mind with that. RC Maniac says, somehow this resume reminds me of a product description, like if you went to a conference and there was a flyer about what a company was selling. Interesting. Well, we'll dive in a little bit and we'll see what we have here. So they're listing their GPA up here right away as part of their education. Now I can't highlight anything on here because it was a screenshot that was embedded into a PDF. So I can't highlight anything. The fact that the name of their school wraps looks a little weird. So it's already starting off on like it would have been nicer if they did this a slightly different way. To some companies, where you went to school is more important than like the projects that you worked on and some of the skills that you know, especially if it's like a really popular school and really well-known, well-respected education facility. For others, it's less important. Me personally, I say put the education at the bottom. Once you've got like a little bit of work in the tech industry, nobody cares where you went to school. They're going to care more about your work experience and projects. But if it's important to you that this is prominent at the top of your resume, then do that. From here, they break their skills down into programming languages, databases, frameworks, and cloud computing services. I'm not a fan of bullet points. I'm not a fan of like the vertical bar, like just put commas in between things. In this case, the bullet point, the applicant tracking system is going to split on that anyway. It may split on that vertical bar, but from a human reader point of view, like you have to keep that in mind too. Like the first thing you have to get through is the applicant tracking system, but from there, a human being is reading this. And so it has to be readable to a human being. And again, the thing with dates, you're kind of burying the dates here right in the middle of the page. It does make it a little harder to find those dates, especially when some of the dates are going to be over here with your education. Some of them are over here with your experience. I would probably, if anything, I would move the education over to the right column, maybe down at the very bottom, and see if there's any other information on here that you could move over into that left column. Either that or just figure out a way to reformat this into a single column and just put everything in a single column similar to the last resume that we reviewed here. And if you want to see that review, you can go check that on YouTube as well. I'm going to split these videos later to be separate videos on YouTube. All right, so let's take a look here. So from a skills point of view, these skills look fine. They're showing me different programming languages. JavaScript has a capital S. So again, someone else mentioned in chat, like pay attention to detail on things like that. Same thing with versions. So the point that Core Count was making about, having strange versions of technologies on here, or is that an actual version for that particular technology? You want to make sure that you're spelling things the way that that the developer of that technology expected it to be spelled. Again, it's just an eye for detail. Otherwise, that's the only one that stands out to me as being a little off. Most other people, put a lowercase SQL on Postgres, or they just call it Postgres with no QL on there. These other ones seem fine. Volunteering, CP lead, code chief, AIT. Competitive programming lead. So again, a lot of companies aren't going to care about competitive programming. All this tells them is that you work very, very quickly. You still have to know how to write algorithms and get through problems and so on in a hurry. And so your recall is really fast. But a lot of the things that you're doing in these competitive programming things are things like leak code challenges, which are not really indicative of what you're doing day to day. So I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but I would say, like in the US at least, I don't think that there's a lot of weight given to um, competitive programming. The fact that this is under a volunteer sort of role here, as a competitive programming lead, you organized and managed various workshops teaching students the fundamentals of programming and providing a blueprint to start learning data structures and algorithms. Okay. So that's okay, but I don't think, like, I would say, like, you did that as a volunteer and you're telling me the organization that you did it for. But again, I don't think it's important to really highlight that this is part of a competitive programming kind of thing. Also conducted various contests in college to promote a competitive coding environment in college. Is that part of being that lead as a volunteer? Well, in this case, you conducted contests, okay, to promote a competitive coding environment in college. Okay. Again, to me, competitive programming has very little value to me. And it's going to be that way for other companies. So similar to what I say on other resume reviews, you only want to put on a resume what's important to the company where you're applying for a job. It's really hard to write like a one-time resume where you build like the one perfect resume and you give that to everybody. That's typically not a thing. I think it's important to customize a resume for that particular role where you're applying. And so my typical advice is go build a big resume, trim it down to one page when you're ready to apply for a particular job. So go build a resume with all of these skills, all these technologies, all your volunteer work and what you did with competitive programming and leading and organizing these events and so on. But then when you go to apply for a job, if that kind of thing is not important to them, take it off the resume. In this case, there's a lot of empty space on the page, and so maybe they left it here because they needed to fill up the space with something. For me, though, the fact that they've done internship roles and they're trying to get a job, I would rather see project work on this resume. And we do see some project work, but we'll talk about like how to expand this out a little bit. I think expanding those projects and promoting the projects a little bit more as a new graduate, I think is going to be more important than highlighting this sort of thing. So again, I think the format of the resume in this case could be shifted a little bit where there's not as much prominence put on the LeetCode code and the competitive programming aspect of things. Why is a credential ID listed? RC Maniac was asking in chat. So for this certification, they're listing a credential ID. Some credentials actually have a verification where they can copy and paste that and just verify that that's a real credential and verify that they actually got that particular credential. In this case, it was Google Compute Engine. Google, Amazon, and Azure all have their certifications, and I believe they have verification tooling where you can put in an ID and verify that, yes, Ian Douglas got that certification on such and such a date, and you can get some context about that certification. And so it's just an extra verification step, because otherwise you could say like, oh yeah, I've got all these certifications, but this is just an extra step of proving that you actually have that certification. So yeah, having the certification on there is really prominent and really important. I think that it's a good thing to have on there. Let's go up and look at the experience. So in this case, this person is highlighting their work experience and then putting the project work underneath. The fact that they've worked several internships, I think, is more important than the project work. And so I like that they've got it in this order. They've got a lot of their technical experience where it's relevant work experience, and then they're listing their projects after that. So let's dive in on this a little bit. In this particular case, their very first internship role, they don't tell me anything about it. All these other internships and so on that they've done, they're giving me a lot of bullet points. Well, except in this last one, they only give me one bullet point. But they're giving me a lot of information, but this one, they're not giving me any at all. And they've been there since last November. So November, December, January, February, March, April, May. I mean, presuming they were there at the beginning in November and it's already the end of May, if they're still there, that's 7 full months. Like, tell me what you were doing for 7 months at this company. Like, you had to have been doing something here. Stealth startup for a month, maybe 2 months total. Another one where July through October, so July, August, September, October for 4 months. This internship, May, June, July for 3 months. So they've got a number of internships for a respectable amount of time. But this one, they've been an intern for 7 months and they're not telling me anything about it. So that feels weird. Stealth startup. Do I believe in stealth startups? I know that stealth startups are a thing. The fact that you are actually an intern for a stealth startup makes me think that the founders of that startup were really just taking advantage of your work. But in this case, they're actually telling you who's actually running that stealth startup by providing their LinkedIn profiles. I typically don't care about seeing references on a resume at this point because I think asking people for references is kind of a silly thing in our industry, and just asking for references in general. And I joke often, it's like, hey, give me a list of the 3 people that are going to say the nicest things about you. That's really how I feel about reference checks. So having references on here, okay, it gives some proof that this startup was real, because I could go look up both of these profiles, but you're really making extra work for me in that case. So is it important? I mean, part of me wants to go look up their profiles right now. So I'm going to go look at least one of their profiles. At least the one that doesn't have all the random numbers at the end. So they're the startup from July to October 2021. I mean, the first reference on here, this Akash Tanwar, they don't have any experience on their profile that overlaps this date range from July to October. So this first reference October to November 2021. So this person doesn't have anything that overlaps into October. They do say that as of November 2021 to present, they're building something. They're tokenizing human potential and creating a new asset class of the future, which tells me nothing at all. Helping creators raise capital from fans. All right, buzzwords. Doesn't tell me what their business is actually about. So is it legit? Maybe. But the fact that they're listing a date that even the founder doesn't list throws this into suspicion for me. Do I feel like going and looking up the other one and like typing in like a hexadecimal random number? Not really. So I'm not even going to look up that second one because I can't click on that as a link. Worked on developing the UI for the CXO suite for professional service providers and internet entrepreneurs, ensuring seamless navigation and responsive design. This is a lot of buzzwordy stuff that I think you could trim down and just say, I did UI UX for pleasant user experience. Bullet points shouldn't wrap, but that's the nature of having a really narrow container to put all this stuff in. Help fast track the development of the product. Well, yeah, you were only there for 2 months, so you helped the development of the product. Fast track? I don't know about that. Again, for this 1K Karana Bazaar, you don't tell me anything at all. You've been there the longest of all your internships. You've been there the longest. It's overlapping with still being in school, but you're not telling me anything about it at all. So that would be the first thing I would do. I would add some information about this Karana Bazaar place. Stealth startup. I mean, it's not stealth anymore. The founder has actually given it a name. So go put that name on your resume, that they can go find it from there. Now I am going to go type in this other, and sorry, 785967117A. So they are calling themselves a software consultant. They list themselves as a CTO of a completely different company in this time frame of October to November. They also call themselves a vice president of Goals 101 within this time frame. But they don't even mention a stealth business by the other name that the other co-founder gave. So that immediately throws this whole thing into suspicion for me, that this date range doesn't match either of the people that you're listing as a reference. I would throw this out completely. I would stop reading your resume at this point, because it's suspicious. And I need to find out in a hurry, do you have the skills that I'm looking for this particular job? And yeah, you've got the skills, but as I'm looking through the experience here, something doesn't add up. Be sure to have a good answer of what you did between July 2018, July 2021. It is a big gap, but yeah, they're in school from August 2018 to present. So Core Count was asking in chat, like, what was with the gap of time between this internship and this next internship. So from July 2018 to July 2021. So they started school after this internship. Somehow they got an internship doing web development and then started at school. And then as part of their school, it looks like they found these last 3 internships. They had this internship. It looks like they left that internship and went to another internship, left that internship, went to another internship, which makes it feel a little odd as well that you're doing back-to-back internships while you're still going in, while you're still in school. So again, a lot of the dates and the overlaps and how these things work. Again, I don't know the school. I mean, it could be that the school has like long-running part-time sort of co-op kind of things. I mean, that's what my college did. My 3rd year of college, we had a project that basically we were effectively interns for other companies for the entire final year of school. So from September to April, we were interns effectively in small team internships at several companies. So it is possible to do that on like a part-time basis. So we basically had classes in the mornings, and we'd spend the afternoons working on other projects or homework or working on our internship project. And then occasionally we wouldn't have a class on a particular day, and we would like go to that office and actually work with that team. In my team's case, it was in a whole other city, and so it wasn't very convenient to actually drive 2 hours to that other city to actually attend, stand-ups and so on. But we might get on a phone call, or we would email back and forth like what our status was and things like that. So it is possible that maybe this has this similar kind of co-op internship kind of feel, but the fact that this person has done back-to-back internships like this, but the dates on this stealth startup don't line up with what the founders or the supposed founders or references of that startup claim on their LinkedIn profile. So linking to their LinkedIn profile where I can't verify this information puts the whole resume into suspicion for me. And so I would, at this point, if I were the hiring manager and I was like getting ready to schedule this call, I'd be calling my recruiter and say, hey, shut down that interview. I'm not going to call that person after all. And they're going to give you a phone call and say, hey, sorry, we decided not to move ahead with you. And you don't know why. You submitted a resume you thought was okay, and now you're not moving forward. This would be a reason why. Full stack internship for this company, Desecto, responsible for the development of the front end for the data anonymization application, improving user experience and scaling up the development rate. So again, with scaling up the development rate, like that's very buzzwordy and doesn't tell me anything. Like if you improved a process that made something 25% faster, then tell me what that was. But just saying you scaled up the development rate or you helped fast track the development of the product, like that doesn't actually tell me anything at all. I mean, they hired you as an employee, presumably with the idea of you're going to be part of the team so that we can deploy this thing faster. You're going to help us do that work so we can get this thing out the door. That's why they hire employees. Putting that as a bullet point on here doesn't give me any value at all. Design and learn the development of front-end design using HTML, CSS, Dreamweaver, Photoshop. Also learn the basics of JavaScript. So here they put JavaScript with a capital S. So again, consistency, eye to detail. Completely revamped the ongoing projects with the latest front-end technologies, ensuring seamless navigation, improved UI. A lot of buzzwords in here. Like, give me more concrete, like I learned to do this, I implemented React, which saw a 20% increase or 20% decrease in load time. Like, give me quantifiable information, because right now I'm not getting a lot of, like, I'm not getting a lot of value out of your resume. Like if I looked at this resume going, I need to call this person about applying for a job with my company, I'm going to read through this and go, meh. Like there's nothing in here that's like, whoa, I need to call that person because of that thing that they did. Developed a front end for a calling-based CRM with added privacy preservation. Again, that's too vague. You're not giving me actually any information here. So you developed the front end. You've already told me that because you're full stack. You've already told me that you're working on the user experience and working on front end. So you don't have to repeat this over and over again. This is the kind of stuff where you can reduce this by making these bullet points not grammatically correct and shortening the overall length of what you're putting on the resume. It doesn't need to be this long. It doesn't need to be this explanatory, but you need to stop using buzzwords and you need to actually tell me in technical terms what you did. I think that's what's missing on this resume and could be contributing to why you're not getting called for interviews. Because I'm not getting a lot of hard fact out of here about what you did. Like completely revamped one of the ongoing projects with the latest front-end technologies. Well, what technologies? You know, what was that revamp that you had to do? Raven's Creations, appreciate the subscription. Thank you so much for helping contribute to the diversity in tech. Thank you. Appreciate that very, very much. All right, so let's dig into the project. So similar to what I said on a previous resume review, the project needs to tell me, was it a solo or a group project? Was it and what does the user do? So in this case, paper pay. It helps schools accept payments faster. Great. That's a good user statement. I know now exactly why I would be looking at this application. Simplified for small schools to enable hassle-free online payment. Awesome. That's a really strong start to telling me about this project. From there, built a web-based platform to collect and manage school fees using React, Redux, Firebase, and so on. Great. I would probably format this a little bit differently though. I think the user statement can be a sentence, and then after that, give me bullet points of like what you learned while building the project, and then what was the tech stack that you used. Like in this case, you had to learn Stripe. Chakra UI, never heard of it, but I know Firestore, Cloud Functions, so you're doing some serverless work with React and Redux using Firebase. Great. But you don't list Stripe over here as something that you've done. I would instead of calling it like just cloud computing services, I would call it like online service familiarity or something, where you're listing GCP, Firebase, Stripe, Firestore, Cloud Functions, and then in parentheses put the word serverless on there, because those are the kinds of terms that someone might be looking for. Like, I'm looking for someone who knows serverless. Well, in this case, you've done Cloud Functions. That's serverless architecture. That would flag your resume. Student attendance management system, offering a link. So again, if you can link to GitHub and a live version of your product, that's better. If the link is just going to GitHub, then tell me that the link is GitHub. Like, actually call the link text, say GitHub, so that when I click on it, I know I'm going to GitHub. I could hover over it and see that it's GitHub, but if you actually put the word GitHub on there, then I know that it's going to take me, or expect it's going to take me to GitHub. Hey, J-Buck, good to see you in chat. Just lurking. Cool, no problem. So for that student attendance, again, I think this is a good user statement to get started, but it's starting with it's starting with you. You developed a web-based attendance management system to track student attendance. Well, you already told me it was managing attendance, so you don't have to repeat that. But there's the user statement's kind of in the middle of this overall statement of like, I built this thing using React. When I think of user empathy statements, I think of what would I tell a VC, if I was in an elevator, and they literally call it the elevator pitch, where you've got like 15 seconds to explain, I built an app for a user to do blah, blah, blah. You're not going to get in that elevator and say, hey, I developed a web-based system using React and Redux and Node.js, Express, UI, blah, blah, blah. Ding, they walk out of the elevator and you haven't even told them what the app is or who you built it for or why they should care. So the user empathy statement needs to say something like, I built an app where users can, school administration can track student attendance. That's a user empathy statement. And then tell me, I built this using React and Redux and I learned the following technologies and so on. Sentiment analysis of Amazon Alexa reviews. Analyzed the Amazon Alexa reviews. Well, you already told me that as part of the project name, so you don't have to repeat that again. For positive and negative sentiments. So you could just say analyzed reviews for positive or just sentiment, because sentiment is going to be positive or negative or neutral. So I would shorten this, analyzed reviews for sentiment. Well, again, you've already told me sentiment analysis. Tell me how many things you reviewed. Analyzed 4,000 reviews using various natural language processing. So again, NLP, I know what NLP is, but the average recruiter doesn't know what that is. They may be told by, an engineering manager, like, hey, we need people that have done natural language processing. So they're literally typing in natural language processing. Your resume wouldn't hit on that unless they happen to know that's also called NLP and they put that in as a search term. Your resume is not going to get a hit on there. So in this case, you have to be careful about putting industry-specific terminology in acronym form like this. You need to spell this stuff out at least once on the page so that it'll hit on those words. And then later on, they can say, what was NLP? I think I saw that earlier. And then they'll be like, oh, natural language processing. So again, I would put NLP up in your skills block. So for this one, I would say, I would reword, kind of this whole statement, say analyzed 4,000 reviews or however many reviews, like quantify that for me. Analyzed 4,000 reviews for positive/negative sentiment using NLP technologies like random forest and gradient boosting classifier. I like that you've got achieved an accuracy of 72.9. Like putting those kinds of things in there is great. But yeah, I think you could reword this a little bit. Now, in this case, there's no real user sentiment or user empathy kind of statement to make because you wrote this software specifically for data analysis. So it's not like someone else is going to use this to kind of find this. This is a project that you built for yourself. So in this case, you don't need a user empathy statement. Two-factor auth. In addition to your password, you also need a code generated by the Google Authenticator app on your phone. Users will get a time-based one-time password built using Django. So again, your user empathy statement's in the middle of this. And I would also call this like two-factor auth demo or something like that. And then the user empathy statement is users can get a, or just say, how would I word that? Because you don't want to say like, I built a project for users to demonstrate 2FA. But I mean, that's kind of the point that you want to get across in that user empathy statement. Like, in this case, though, this feels more like a demo that you built for yourself. Again, similar to the last project. This is something that you built for you, or a project that you built for school to demonstrate that you know how to implement this kind of thing. So it's not so much like I built an app for other users to also go use Google Authenticator. You're just demonstrating that you can connect to Google Authenticator and the user can pass back a token and you get verification that they've authenticated. So in this case, I would just say like demo project for users to get a time-based one-time password. And then tell me Google Authenticator, built using Django and so on. But again, your average recruiter probably doesn't know that Django equals Python. Did you do test-driven development? What kind of database did you use? Did you have to use a database or not? Give me more than just Django. A hiring manager who's going to be proficient in technologies is going to know that, oh, that's where you did Python. Any other recruiter looking through this is like, where did you actually learn Python? You tell me up here in your skills block you know Python. I don't see Python anywhere on the page. I also didn't see Kotlin anywhere on the page. I didn't see C++ anywhere on the page. You claim to know these as skills, but you don't tell me how you know them. I've seen React, I've seen Node, I've seen Django and Express. I don't think I've seen GraphQL on here. So like, how did you come to know those skills? Are those skills even going to be important for the jobs where you're applying? If you only kind of know them, I wouldn't put them on the resume. If you've actually used them in a project, I would keep them in a resume, but I would want to see the project where you've actually used GraphQL. If those technologies were parts of your internships, then you need to tell me that as part of your internship, like technology stack or tech stack, and then tell me the technologies that you used at those internships. So I think that there's a lot more information that you can tell me here in this resume to show me, like you've shown me the skills that you know. You've kind of shown me where you've used some of those skills, but not a lot of these skills. And so I would look at this and go, okay, some of this stuff fits, some of it doesn't. The stealth startup thing doesn't fit at all based on what I was able to verify, here online, looking at the LinkedIn profiles that you provide as references. That doesn't line up. So for me, I would be throwing this resume out, go, no, something about this doesn't add up, pass. Now the recruiter might have flagged it for a hiring manager to say like, hey, should I call this person? And the hiring manager is going to write back and say no. And they just pass on your profile. And so in this particular case, the resume that was submitted came with a note saying, I'm submitting this resume and I'm not getting phone calls. I think this is why. So hopefully that list of advice is going to be helpful. Again, it will depend a little bit on the companies where you're applying, but I think building a larger resume with all these skills, tell me a lot more about your projects, tell me a lot more about your internships, build a really big resume. And when you're ready to apply for a particular job, figure out what's important to that company. What technologies does that company care about? What is that company doing? What kinds of technologies are they learning? Trim your resume down and only keep the stuff that they're going to care about. Trim everything else out. And I think that maybe reformatting into a single column may also help the wrapping of some of these bullet points. So when a human being reads a bullet point list, we're typically only picking up the first couple of words of the bullet point. So responsible for the development, anonymization application, improving user development rate, developed front end for calling based, completely revamped, frequently involved. Like that's all I'm really reading as I'm skimming over this page. The very first time I'm skimming over this page, I'm literally spending like 6 to 10 seconds trying to find keywords in a hurry of should I call this person? The recruiter's also doing that, by the way. So the recruiter's kind of skimming over it a little bit going, I see some of the keywords that the hiring manager told me to look for. I'm going to send it on to them and find out from them whether I should call you. So typically the recruiter isn't calling you without consulting the hiring manager first. Like they're not going to look at this and go, wow, this is a cool resume. I'm going to call them, find out what they're interested in, and then find out from the hiring manager if I should have spent that time calling you. They're going to have them vetted a little bit more before they call you. And in this case, I think it's not passing that vetting point because of what I've sort of reviewed here on the resume for you. So hopefully that's helpful. I'm going to just scroll back through chat here a little bit just to see if there are other comments. Nope. Cool. So I'll wrap that up as a resume review, and then I'll get into some of the other comments here. Thanks for checking that out. I hope that you found it helpful. I always appreciate feedback, so please let me know what you think. I appreciate any subscriptions, so please tell your friends and colleagues about it as well. Check out the website techinterview.guide for more information about when I'm live streaming and all of my free content. Drop by a live stream anytime to ask questions or message me privately, whatever makes you most comfortable. See you next time.